Hi, and welcome to the Restorative Wellness Clinicians Corner, a video series exclusively for functional health professionals, where we interview the top experts in the latest research, products, tools, and best practices for getting your clients exceptional results. Hello, everyone. I am so excited to bring this podcast to you today. This conversation is with Michael Antonelli, founder of Healthgevity supplement line, which I have to say is quickly becoming one of my favorite supplement lines. Michael and I discuss one of the most requested topics we get asked about, which is peptides. What are they? How do we use them clinically? What are some of the peptides that we can use as non-licensed practitioner? What are the mechanisms involved? We talk about how to think of them and how to use them in clinical practice, their efficacy, the research, and why certain research does not exist on them. We even have some cautionary words before jumping on the peptides bandwagon overall. This is a must listen to episode for everybody. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I learned a ton. It is filled with clinical pearls, and you're going to love it. Also, if you are interested in checking out some of the truly innovative products that Michael and his team have developed, stay on until the end to get a special offer. Enjoy. Welcome everybody. So excited to have you here and so looking forward to today's conversation. This has been one of the most requested topics that we have ever had, and that is going to be diving into the world of peptides. And we are very honored to have Michael Antonelli here with us. I'm going to read you his professional bio in a moment, but I just want to let you know how I learned of Michael. As you know, our fantastic medical director, Dr. Chris Turnpaugh, he had been raving about Michael for years, and I recently met Michael in person at the Mindshare Leadership Summit, which was super fun. And I learned there that he is an NTP. That's one of his many different designations and trainings. So he's one of us, you guys. This is going to be super fun. Let me read you his professional bio. Throughout a career spanning over 18 years, Michael passionately devoted himself to pioneering methods aimed at enhancing longevity, optimizing health span, and elevating overall quality of life. His focus revolves around collaborating with leading healthcare professionals, researchers, and other like-minded healthcare leaders to create natural solutions that elevate patient outcomes. Michael utilizes his past experiences that integrate a diverse range of therapies and services, spanning from precision diagnostics to practice management strategies, hormone optimization, nutritional supplements, and leveraging peptides. His previous roles included Chief Innovation Officer, Executive Director, and Business Development for leading companies within the healthcare industry before founding Healthgevity, which is rapidly becoming one of my favorite supplement lines. His expertise extends beyond conventional approaches, emphasizing holistic well-being and personalized care as essential components to any successful practice. By championing novel methodologies and innovative technologies, Michael facilitates transformative changes within the healthcare landscape, fostering advancements that positively impact both practitioners and the individuals they serve. Michael continues to remain dedicated to the pursuit of innovative strategies that enhance health and vitality while reshaping the paradigms of healthcare. Michael, welcome.
It is my pleasure to be here with your community today. Thank you so much for inviting me.
I just can't wait to dig in. Before we get into all the juicy details, I actually would love to know a little bit about your own personal journey. You've been in this field for a long time. Starting a supplement company is no small feat. Creating something that is unique and so high quality, steeped in the research, and distinguishes itself from all the others, as far as I can tell, is also, that is just an incredible endeavor. And then integrating oral peptides into that mix. And I know, looking at the ingredients on your products, there's nothing gratuitous. Everything is so well thought through. Some of my favorite ingredients, we've had Sean Wells on the podcast before talking through some of the ingredients that he has formulated. I see some of his things in here. I see, just some of the most cutting edge stuff. How did you get here?
How much time do we have? I'll try to keep this short, but I started in this world in 2006, and that's where I first met Dr. Jeffrey Bland and Mark Hyman, and saw firsthand like what natural approaches could really mean short and long term in a patient's journey. And I think that was like not only my light bulb moment, but more of a frustration because here I am, like, why didn't I know about this sooner? Why did my family know about this? Why is since I started in this role was the first time I ever took vitamins, right? There was like all these whys happening. But then when I saw these transformations, I mean, I've been so blessed to rub elbows with so many incredible natural healers. Yeah, I like to say we've blended integrative, functional, and regenerative medicine, but I've seen sick people get better in front of my eyes. People that were struggling to walk get better. And it wasn't because they left a 2-minute office visit on 4 prescriptions.
Right.
It was the role of fixing their lifestyle choices, eating better, moving better, supplementing better. And that's where I just became, I guess, a little bit clear and targeted where I wanted to end up. But I think along the lines I've worked with some of the leading companies, and you start better understanding how they make choices. You start seeing why they started the company and then how politics get involved. We start seeing, or when you know enough, you're like, well, why'd you choose that ingredient? Why did you not do that for them? Why did you only dose it here? And you start thinking like, well, if we truly are here to change healthcare, to help more people, why are certain decisions happening? And then I think during COVID, like so many of us, we saw firsthand also why healthy people weren't doing so well. And during that time where we really needed to count on the professional healthcare brands, many of them stopped innovating and spent more time setting up their Amazon Prime store. And, connecting with incredible practitioners like Dr. Turnpaugh, urging me to say, Michael, no one's going to do this. You got to do it. And so there's a couple things that were really important to me and why we started this. And during these 2 decades, I've formed incredible relationships on a research ingredient side, on a frontline practitioner side, to researchers, and I wanted to create this global collaboration where we all come together, identify a target, and then work backwards, identify and go through the latest research, identify emerging ingredients at the right doses that create this wide net in the body that puts the patient outcome first. And, I always say Healthgevity is not going to be your go-to for vitamin C and some of the more commodity. There's plenty of ways to get those. What we wanted to do is create innovation that harnesses the hallmarks of aging, that optimizes health span, and really truly improves quality of life. So it's not about this whole lifespan story where it's like, let's live to 150. It's really about every single day we wake up blessed to be alive, to maximize that day we have ahead of us. That's what Healthgevity stands for. And we want to blend the best of emerging ingredients with ingredients that you have grown to trust and put together these wide nets that influence positive change in all of us. So I'm excited about all these areas that I think we're going to go down to today, and then even more fun with the questions.
I know this is going to be good. Well, I want to start off at the beginning because when we talk about peptides, I feel like there is so much confusion. It's this kind of like sexy, fun new term. I know that peptides have been around for a very long time, but they've just gained this popularity and have been seen almost as the magic pill for all the things lately. And so I want us to actually just go back to the beginning, even though these are clinicians. I think it's really helpful to make sure we're all on the same page. So can you just walk us through the basics? What exactly are peptides? I'm thinking like their chemical structure and like just giving some examples of different types of peptides.
Absolutely. Great place to start. And I like to refer to peptides as small proteins, right? So these are chains of amino acids ranging from 2 to 40 amino acids. Sometimes more. The FDA has updated and evolved the definition. It used to be more, now it's 40 or below as a peptide. And so these are signalers, they're modulators, they're part of the communication network. And I always like to start by saying, the most popular, well-known peptide is insulin. Yeah. When I talk to people, regardless if they're practitioners or not, they hear peptide, they think collagen peptides. And okay, well, that's a good start too. But then what we're also seeing are these emerging peptides, things like BPC-157. And so, we may talk about this, I don't know if we're going to get to it, but there's millions of peptides naturally occurring in nature. And we now know that. So we're leveraging, artificial intelligence to actually identify these naturally occurring peptides. And we're trying to work within the means. So I think, there's been a lot of change in the last couple of years with peptide regulation from a 503A and 503AB, 503A, 503B pharmacy standpoint to then this boom of oral peptides. But peptides have different delivery. So yes, you could inject, you could take it orally, nasal spray, topical. So there's a lot of ways to administer. And obviously, a lot of that determines on your scope of practice, on what you have access to. And was that what you were looking for as far as?
Yeah, that is a perfect place to start. And let's start, because there are so many different peptides and we hear about some of them a lot. I will admit, before doing the deeper research for this, I was like, insulin's a peptide? Who knew? So I think that's, they are a part of just the toolkit, right? That both medical and more functional health practitioners have been using for a really long time. I want to talk about different delivery methods. I'm going to kind of go a little bit. You mentioned that. Because there are so many different peptides. Do different peptides have better absorbability, bioavailability based on different delivery methods? Like, this type of peptide is best oral. This type of peptide is best injectable. I know through some of my homework that, insulin, for example, they haven't figured out a way other than injecting to make it efficacious. But is that basically the case across all peptides? That each peptide has its best vehicle of delivery?
That's a yes and no. So I think in a lot of cases, injectable is going to be superior, but it really comes down to the target in the body. So there are some preparations where oral could get to the gut. If the gut is the main target, then oral may be a preference. When we think about our skin, right, topical might be better in that case.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's as clear cut. I think a lot of people over the last couple of years feel like it's injectable or nothing. And I talk to doctors that come on board kind of late and say, well, I thought peptides get denatured and only can be injected. Well, we're proving that wrong, right? And there's advancements in technologies that we can help create this buffer and protection around the peptide to safeguard it around pH changes and hydrochloric acid and things like that. So I think it's peptide driven and also intended target driven on what would be the best delivery method for that particular case.
Okay, that makes sense. I want to dig into that more, but before we do, I want to ask a question, just kind of big picture. So you shared about how, we produce, and it's just natural substances. We produce a lot of these peptides ourselves. When we're talking about peptides that we're taking from an exogenous source, are they always mimicking endogenous substances, or are they sometimes actually being manipulated to create like a new peptide that are unfamiliar to our bodies?
Yeah, I think, it's going in there and modulating and changing signals, right? A deficiency that's happening. So I don't think it comes in as a foreign source. I think it comes in and helps be that crossing guard to help facilitate the root cause of dysfunction in the body. And I think for a lot of us, especially, the fellow NTPs on here, when we think about the role of phytonutrients and, you just think about an apple, for example, there are plenty of peptides naturally occurring in that apple. Some of them are getting destroyed. Some of them are at very low levels. But this is why so many of us are trained to lead with cleaning up the diet and start with what we put in our mouths. And so it kind of goes hand in hand with, peptide therapy and, kind of impacting the right signaling and communication network in the body.
Can you say a little bit more about that? I love this analogy of the peptides as the crossing guards. So we can think of them not as replacement. I mean, you already gave the example of, we're not going to Healthgevity for a vitamin C, right? But bringing in these peptides can allow our bodies to make better use of the nutrients that we're putting in. Am I understanding you better?
That's right. Yeah, absolutely. And we think about our bodies are capable of some incredible things naturally, right? And we get distracted, the body's overwhelmed, or it's stressed, or it's under a toxic burden, or it's inflamed. And that impacts the body's ability to respond favorably to things. And so peptides are there to kind of help bring a solution or kind of quiet the noise to allow the body to do what it's intended to do. Kind of looks at, that child who gets the paper cut and heals so quickly versus that older person where it continues to bleed and it doesn't just heal, or maybe you're bruising easily at an older age than when you were younger. And it kind of just shows as we wear down, as we're aging, aging and chronic disease go hand in hand, but so does the communication within our bodies, right? That cell communication. And so, peptides are being turned to, and I think, not to glorify what's happening with the Ozempic craze, but I think there's a combination of like what that's doing for some people, whether it's good or bad, that's a whole other topic. But then we see things like WADA and professional athletes getting banned because they're using peptides to get that edge. I think that's what's helping increase awareness that people are onto something, right? These things are making a difference, whether it's repair and recovery, whether it's leaky gut happening, whether it's weight loss resistance. And so it's starting to catch people's attention. They're like, wow, this may be something I should consider or layer into what I'm already doing. Very little downside and a high ceiling. So, that's why I think you're seeing this peptide craze happen.
Right. When I was, looking at the different uses, I felt like my first question to you was going to be, what are the different uses? And then my questions started to change into, well, maybe I should just ask, what can't we use it for? Because it starts to feel like it can be beneficial, or there must be a peptide for almost everything, right? Even if you just think of from like wound healing, you talked about gut repair. I know that there are neuroprotective aspects, anti-inflammatory, antimicrobial, antioxidant. Is there anything these cannot do? Make your bed, maybe.
There's a running joke where there's a peptide for that, right? That's kind of what we always say. And this is the beauty here, because regardless of if you're just starting out in your practice or you have an advanced, flourishing practice, peptides can be dropped in and make a huge difference for pretty much every one of your protocols. And so I think that's why maybe there's so much excitement around the topic today. And, regardless of what you're already on or wherever you're at in your journey, you can plug these in and good things will happen.
Awesome. So let's go back. I'd asked the question about different delivery mechanisms, and I want to pick just kind of as our case study for today, because there's so many different peptides that we could talk about. And I've had lots of questions about, best peptide for this, best peptide for that. So don't worry, those who are in the audience, I will get there. But just for the purpose of, just to kind of do a deeper dive into a peptide, I want to talk about the BPC 157. And that's just one of three, actually four, right? Four. It's not considered, no, snack's not a peptide.
And PA is not a peptide either. So there's two peptides, two additional ingredients.
Okay. So, but it's one of the main ingredients in this product. And I just have to tell you guys a little backstory. I met Michael at like the perfect moment in my life, because about a week and a half earlier, I think it was 10 days earlier exactly, I had an accident at the gym and dislocated my kneecap and torn a ligament, blah, blah, blah. Anyways, I was not weight bearing. I was on crutches and I was in a lot of pain and grumpy about the whole situation. Michael had his booth there, and the number of people, I actually went home with such a stash of these. I never told you this, because Turnpaw was like, you need this. You handed me a bottle. Tim Organ at one point handed me a bottle. So I have been loving these. I've been taking these religiously ever since that. And, I will tell you, my recovery is going brilliantly. But I want to talk about the BPC, because I've taken these from the Healthgevity product orally. I have also, now there also is other, there is the other KPV peptide in here as well. So, but I've also I took a break from this for 2 weeks and I did injections, which was very scary. But I did it. So I wanted to use this as an example to talk about the differences. And you talked about the target. So let's talk about this. So oral versus injectable, using BPC 157 as an example. So there are definitive, and there's some good research on the gut healing effects. In fact, this is a peptide that originates in the gut, correct?
That is correct. Yep.
So it would make sense to take it orally for gut-related purposes.
That's right. And that's really where it's gaining a lot of popularity is its role with intestinal permeability.
I want to dig into that, but before we do, just for somebody who's taking it, so actually, let's start here. What are all the different things that this one peptide, BPC 157, I know that seems like a small question, could be? What are all the different applications, even if it's just a short list of some of the most popular ones?
Yeah, I would say probably most popular is keep it more streamlined. 'Cause this could be, we could talk all day just on this peptide. But it works systemically in the body, right? And because of that, you're getting this full body, right? It's kind of, I call it the Roomba peptide, that robotic vacuum that searches around the floor for things to clean up. If there's nothing there to pick up or clean up, it continues to move and search. That's what this is doing in the body. So it's there to search for dysfunction and help the body naturally respond and facilitate repair and resolution. So the gut, the joints. So when we think about any gut dysfunction, anybody on a PPI, Crohn's, colitis, IBS, IBD, then we have that repair of the athlete or the weekend warrior. And what we also see is that people feel like they're sleeping better from it. If you're on growth hormone, it activates growth hormone receptors, so that helps. Immune dysfunction is going to help modulate the response for the immune system.
Right.
And so it's all these main buckets. But where I see it stacked up and being used the most is going to be gut dysfunction. Then you have this Lyme and co-infection mast cell response, and then musculoskeletal dysfunction.
And are there different, so if we think about target tissue, does that mean that we want to be using oral BPC when we're thinking about gut and injections when we think systemically, or is oral as effective as injections when we're thinking about, just to be selfish, my knee?
Yeah, I've heard this from some really well-respected orthopedic doctors that swear that the oral is as effective as injectable.
Awesome.
Now, historically, people feel like injecting it direct into an injury site would be a better response. In some cases it is, and we've also seen some cases where a combination of injection and oral, hitting it from both angles, also provided a valuable response. And then, again, I don't know how deep you want to go about, well, there's going to be people listening that don't have access to the injectable.
Yeah.
And so it's oral or nothing. And we've seen the oral, especially, we have 3 different formulas based around BPC 157. So we have it on a standalone, we have it with PEA, then we have the trio that you're holding that has the PEA and the KPV. And so those supportive casts will also widen the scope and improve the efficiency of this kind of wide net of helping BPC work quicker and be more efficacious.
Excellent. Excellent. The Clinician's Corner podcast is sponsored by Restorative Wellness Solutions, the premier clinical training program for health practitioners who want to learn how to finally get to the root source of their clients' health concerns and help them reverse complex health challenges and chronic illness. You can't afford to keep guessing. Your clients can't afford it either. Today's clients are sicker than ever before. Their health histories are more complex than ever before. And you simply can't deliver the results they crave or build the practice you desire without the right clinical skills. Enter Restorative Wellness Solutions' foundational course, Mastering the Art and Science of Gastrointestinal Healing. Our clinically proven, systematic approach to restoring balance within the body that has helped over 1,000 practitioners transform their clients' lives, grow their business, and change the way health is delivered. In less than 12 weeks, you'll develop the clinical skills and confidence you need to help your clients feel better, faster. Learn how to work with advanced lab testing to identify food sensitivities and imbalances within the gut. Craft custom targeted protocols that truly resolve your clients' gut issues, and work safely and effectively with supplements to deliver consistently life-changing results. Visit masterguthealing.com to apply today. Let's talk about degradation in the gut, because that's always the first question. And as I was doing my research from this, that's always the critique, right? Like, oh, it degrades in the gut, so how can it be effective systemically unless you're using it very specifically for GI? Speak to us about that. And we can use it. We can speak in context of the BPC, and if there's others, that you want to mention in this too.
Yeah, well, I think BPC as 15 amino acids is actually a larger peptide to take orally. But because it is found in the gastric juice, there was always, even when compounding pharmacies were offering this, they always had an oral option. And so what we started doing actually was introduced to a really unique ingredient in 2016, which is saccharosate sodium. And at that time, I was with another company. We were looking at a sublingual vitamin B12 that was bound with saccharosate sodium, which is SNAC. And they had results where this oral was as impactful as injectable or IV B12, which was at that point unheard of. So I started looking at it, and we actually were the first group that took saccharosate sodium and bound it with the BPC 157. And then as a newer company, right, doctors were using other things and they start using ours, and they're like, this is working quicker, it's working faster. Or we had doctors that were only using injectable, lost access to injectable, switched to us and really didn't miss a beat. And so what this is doing at lower doses, how we're using it, is creating almost this liposome protective shield to withstand some of that degradation, or the denaturing that peptides go through.
Right.
And we are using this technology in several different peptide formulas where we see it could best fit it. But it's made a big difference. And we've had some doctors that say, I was a non-believer that peptides can be delivered orally, and, ended up trying yours or using yours, or a colleague recommended you. And wow, I'm thoroughly surprised about what it's doing and how quick it's doing it. So I think we're onto something here. And listen, we're not the only company now. We've been copied by some out there that are looking at it. But even for the listeners that are familiar with like GLP-1s, right? The GLP-1s were historically injection only, like most peptides. And now there is a oral option of GLP-1s, which is bound by high dose saccharosate sodium. So, other areas, and it is GRAS approved, so it is approved for supplement status. And we think it gives us a really nice advantage when delivering multiple peptides that way.
Has there been research done on the efficacy, looking at the difference between oral versus injectable? And even within injectable, as soon as I got mine, I'm not a needles person. I'm terrified of them. So doing it myself was a huge hurdle. And there was the discussion of, do I do it in the belly? Do I do it actually in the knee? And there is, for me, not a chance that I was going anywhere that knee with a needle. I just couldn't get my head around it. But I've seen a lot of sort of discussion on that and not a lot of agreement on whether it's actually needed. So is there research? I know that the research on this, and then I want to actually ask about that, because it feels like the research on this, a lot of it has been done mostly on animals, not much on humans yet. Do you see a potential for this research happening down the road?
So, and this, people are always surprised when I tell them this. There's actually been only one published study picking on BPC 157 here in humans. And so the majority is animals or N of ones or Reddit or, people sharing these success stories. And the only doctor to have a published study with BPC 157 is Dr. Edwin Lee, who's an endocrinologist out of Orlando, Florida. It's one of the webinars I picked for you to check out because, he was doing an injectable study with humans, and he's now using our oral combination that you're using with the KPV and the PEA, and with great success, right? So I think, getting back to the question of the injection versus oral, human data, unfortunately not where we like it to be. Is it going to happen? It's doubtful because you can't patent these things anymore, right? These peptides, the ones that at least BPC. And so to fund a large-scale IRB-approved, double-blind, placebo-controlled study, and to pay for that anyone else would have access to, it's not as appealing.
Right.
Where you have this tribe, right, of millions of users around the world that are already using something. And so to us, it wasn't reinventing the wheel. It was, well, how do we leverage this incredible peptide? And that's where you're seeing evolutions of the additions of the PEA and the KPV come out as well.
That is really helpful context as to why there isn't that research. Because of course that's often used for people who want to discredit them. That's often used as they're like, well, there's no research on humans yet. So now, is this also, I know that there's a lot of, and I do want to dig into this a little bit later, but there's a lot of kind of DIY, like order from here, but it's not for, there's always these warnings, research only, not for use in humans. I'm assuming that's because of some slippery loops that they are sliding through in order to allow people to order them themselves, and not because of any overt risk.
I'm still shocked that when I go on Facebook and Instagram, there are these ads of injections. And so when you claim, and this is going to be really, I think, helpful for your community. So when you claim research only, not for human consumption on a bottle, you're basically throwing out any need to follow quality control.
Right.
That can literally be me and you at your kitchen table.
Terrifying.
Actually, probably be cleaner in your kitchen. Let's see. We go in your garage, your basement. We could mix some stuff up, put a nice label on it, and sell it to people. And then you're injecting it. I just don't understand it unless you're at the last phase of hope, right? You've tried everything, and you got nothing to lose. Then so be it. But it's a dangerous area. And I was just at a medical conference, and there was a doctor talking about the use of these research only compounds. And he said, show of hands, what doctors are doing this in the practice? And a couple of them, put their hands up. He's like, are you kidding me? It takes one adverse event with the patient, and in this case, maybe a client. Your license is lost. You don't have a foot to stand on. And if you're putting these in the medical notes that you're even talking about this stuff, it's bad news. But there's miseducation around it, because you're like, well, if it was really so bad, how is these sites able to exist? How is Facebook allowing these ads to happen? And so I can understand the confusion. I'm glad we had some time to talk about it, because I always say we got to think about what your patients have access to or are seeing to get ahead of it.
100%. I think it is really scary. And for, a lot of our alumni and our people here are non-licensed practitioners, which it feels like it's this like really interesting place because it's non-licensed, it's not very well regulated, which can feel like the Wild West, which in many ways it is. But in my opinion, this is why we need to be extra careful, because there's a big target on our backs. And we want to be very, 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 very cautious. So, would you agree with me, am I just being too conservative? I mean, when I did my peptides, it was through a doctor who ordered from a reputable compounding pharmacy. I mean, I even with that, I was terrified. That little bottle came. I thought, what am I doing here? Just the fact that I was doing it myself was this major mental leap that I had to get across, and I had to remind myself, people with diabetes do this with their insulin. You're going to be okay, and I was fine. But I feel like a best practice for practitioners, especially non-licensed practitioners, if a client comes to you asking about this and wanting to use one of these websites, is to actually document in writing that you recommend against it for all the reasons you just said, and have that verbal conversation and then document it in writing, so that if they do, even if you have a conversation about the peptide, and I think it's this slippery slope that a lot of people end up coming into, where they're excited about it too. We're all excited about the potential of these products, which is one of the reasons why I'm so excited about the work that you are doing, because you are helping non-licensed practitioners with really good training understand how and where to safely incorporate these into their practice in a way that is very safe, that is extremely high quality with rigorous testing. And if somebody does want to do injectables, there are lots of fantastic doctors who are prescribing and working with reputable compounding pharmacies. Would you agree? And I'm saying this not as like just a sales pitch for you. I'm saying this as a real matter of protection, because I agree with you. One something goes sideways, and if you're connected in any way, then you're a very, very easy target.
Yeah, agreed, and well said. And I think part of what you're doing is facilitating the good, the bad, the ugly, right? So to document, hey, we talked about some injectable things that I don't have access to, I don't recommend. I told them, not to, but yeah, to voice, at least put that in the records. But it's a great opportunity to collaborate with practitioners that do have prescribing rights, that do have sources of reputable 503A pharmacies that are doing the right thing. And then even like the ones we're at least putting out oral peptides under the guidance of CGMPs that are going through strict supplement status, right? Quarantining as soon as the raw material comes in, several points of checking purity, identity, finished products, heavy metals. Like these are all things that they are part of being a supplement company. But you got this gray area that I know it looks good and intriguing on paper, but it is super risky.
I want to follow this path of being a non-licensed practitioner because it's always this fine line that we walk in terms of what we have access to and what's appropriate for use and what we recommend. So what do we have access to some oral peptides? Is it all oral peptides or just or most? Are there oral peptides? And maybe this is well known. I'm ignorant to this. Are there some oral peptides that are completely off limits to unless you are a licensed prescribing medical physician?
This is still a gray area that's not well defined for 503As on what they can and can't compound. I will say, as of today's recording, right, that we're live, there's going to be some oral peptides that we don't feel comfortable delivering because we don't feel it's, classified as a supplement or naturally occurring. So yeah, I mean, the ones that we're putting out there are orally bioavailable and we feel have status as a nutritional supplement.
Okay. Let's talk about risk and, contraindications. These just sound like fantastic compounds. Can anybody benefit from them? Or are there certain things, even in the oral form, that we want to be really aware of as practitioners, either certain ages, different, sex, different medical conditions, other supplements, other medications? I know I threw a huge list at you there if you want to pick piece by piece, but what are the things that we need to be thinking of as clinicians as when it's not appropriate to incorporate peptides?
Yeah, so as the owner of a company, right, and this is recorded, I have to say certain things, right? So this has not been studied during pregnancy,
right,
during breastfeeding, 18 and under, and then I take it usually a step further by active cancer. And usually there's a rule of thumb that's taught in the CME world that 5 years or more clean is kind of the window to then integrate back in peptide therapy. So the same here, that would probably be the big areas of caution. And if you are going to dive into some of those areas, even more reason to have that collaborative physician on board that can go deep, do diagnostic tests, get the baseline, and help manage potential issues that come about.
Right. What about contraindications with other supplements and other medications? Are there any things there are so many peptides, I feel like there's no possibility of us touching all of them. But if we want to continue with our, BPC 157 example.
Yeah, another good question. I think anytime you see saccharosate sodium being used, that should be used away from food and probably other supplements, right? Kind of take it on its own.
Yeah. So that's the snack. For those of you who are listening to this, just if you are wanting to write it down, the acronym SNAC, you can look it up.
Yeah, there's other peptides that we have out in our portfolio that don't utilize that because we have data showing we don't need it. That would give you more flexibility to then stack with other supplements. But what we've seen is that when you're using that on its own, it should be in a fasted state without other supplements stacked with it.
But if somebody is taking other supplements, that's not anything else that someone should be concerned with. I mean, I can appreciate, for example, it might be redundant if somebody is taking this and also taking some gut healing supplements, because this is likely doing a really good job of it and you don't need to be taking your glutamine or whatever you're taking for that, right? So there could be duplication, but that's not necessarily harmful. But are there any things that if you're taking with this, even if you're taking it at a different time of day, that you should really stay away from? Or is it?
Yeah, we don't have any call outs. And, using the L-glutamine example, right? I think, BPC is great, but even in combination with some of the other go-tos that you're going to see for gut healing, it's only going to help move things forward quicker. So I think it really comes down to budget. But if somebody's already, a pro and on a lot of supplements, it's not to say stop taking other things. It's more of just be mindful how your body feels, and then maybe just have a little bit of a separate introduction time on when you're going to do the BPC.
Got it. Can we speak a little bit about, you mentioned it briefly at the beginning, it seems like there's a lot of confusion around regulation with this, not maybe so much around the oral, but definitely around injectables, hearing about, this peptide's available now. It's not available. It's only available in these states. It seems like there's, I don't know if it's like a panic situation or a confusion, but it does feel like these things are going kind of on and off the market very quickly. Can you just give us a little bit of the behind the scenes on that?
Yeah, I'll go deep and you just tell me when to stop. But, I think it started during COVID. Thymosin alpha 1 was one of the more well-known go-tos. Originally, it had orphan drug status, which granted it into 503As to compound. I'm going to be careful what I say here, but I guess towards the end of COVID, the FDA changed their mind and pulled the orphan drug status on thymosin alpha 1, and it immediately went away. It was not on the approved substance list.
And it was very effective, as I understand. I mean, I know a lot of people were using it, and there was quite a big hoopla when that came away. So for whatever the FDA's reasons of taking it out of that drug status, now there's not. So is that now, it continues to be illegal to use that particular?
It is being lobbied to come back, that particular peptide. Then you have thymosin beta 4, which is another well-known injectable. The FDA redefined what a peptide is to 40 amino acids, as we talked about earlier. Thymosin beta 4 is 43 amino acids, so that also took that off the approved 503A list. And then there's other things, like even BPC, right? 2 years, actually last fall, the FDA came in and re-ruled on classification, blamed it on lack of safety, and published human data on many of these peptides, right? GHK copper as an injectable. Then we looked at things like BPC, KPV. There was a list of 20 peptides. And so some of them are starting to try to come back. There's 503As lobbying together. They're going in front of Congress. They're trying to get this back. I think RFK is going to be also playing a role in that. But that's why there's been so much confusion, so much flip-flop. I think a lot of it happened actually even back in 2020, where the FDA went after the biggest pharmacy offering peptides. It still wasn't super clear what other pharmacies can or can't compound. And then last fall, it went one step further and started sending warning letters out.
Wow. Okay. Well, maybe you can't say it, but I'm going to wonder aloud if this has anything to do with their efficacy combined with lack of patentability. Can perhaps pose a threat to some financial considerations.
Yeah, and a lot of pharmaceutical companies are filing patents on future synthetic peptides. So, there's a lot of that happening, probably forcing what's been happening lately.
We've had a lot of, and I just see there are so many questions in the live stream. So I'm gonna switch there in just a couple minutes. I want to make sure I have a few other things that folks had submitted before. I want to make sure we get to them. So we've had some questions from the community in terms of best peptides for, and I'm going to ask you to keep your best peptides for recommendations to anything that is orally available within scope of practice for our practitioners, so that we're not just sort of teasing with carrots that are out of scope for them. So best peptides for reducing pain.
So you're going to see BPC 157 will be used. KPV is another one. We haven't really talked about KPV as an antimicrobial peptide. It's great for SIBO, candida, any gut dysfunction, mast cell, but also really great for pain. And so KPV will be another one. I know it's not a peptide, but it's in the same formula. If you haven't dove into PEA, it's a lipid resolving mediator. It is so fascinating as a compound. So we put that in there to just even front load the experience. You feel that super quick.
Yeah, I will say, as I said, I've been taking these now for several months, and I noticed a big difference. I was out for a little while, and I noticed a significant difference. You always know that's a good sign, right? You're taking all these things, and then you think, well, it's just doing stuff, and then something runs out, and if you feel a significant difference, you're like, yep, that was working. You kind of already answered this, but to heal the gut.
Yep, you're going to see again those same combo.
Yeah. What about best to maintain weight? And you did mention earlier that they're adding the snack to the semaglutide for an orally bound form. Is that something? I'm just kind of made the assumption, but I should ask and not assume that is going to be the purview of licensed practitioners. But is that going to? Yes, you're nodding yes. Okay.
Yeah, it is a prescription. So when we think about peptides, we have a great peptide for this. It's Formula Ignite. I don't know if you want me to mention names. I don't have.
Yeah, please.
Keep it generic, but it's a peptide DNF10. DNF10 is fermented through Saccharomyces cerevisiae. Multiple human studies published. The one at 500 milligrams had over 120 participants in it. And what we saw by week 8 is that the average participant was consuming 600 less calories per day. And so this is a peptide that's going to be modulating the release of leptin and ghrelin. And so we think about the hunger cues, and this doesn't work overnight, but if you give it time, this is a really fascinating, well-studied, well-published peptide. Again, the name is DNF10.
Wonderful. And I'm going to ask, does it have similar side effects? It doesn't sound like, based on the mechanisms you've just described, doesn't sound like it would have these rather brutal side effects that we see with something like semaglutide.
Yeah, super safe. That's what we're always looking for, right? Is what does the literature show? Kind of the predictable outcome, safety profile, and that's where we're leveraging multiple human studies published to confirm that. So, we use it in a stack of other really unique natural compounds, and that's what we call Ignite. But really looking at the root cause of the metabolic dysfunction and where we see some of the clients fall short is their ability to not control hunger at various points of the day. Some people are evening eaters. Some people, they wake up, they got to start eating. So, this is an area where it's not a magic bullet, but you got to play with the best time to introduce that into the body. And it's one of our top formulas because of the impact it's making.
And is that good for both maintaining weight as well as for weight loss? Or is this something that once one has achieved their ideal weight, they would not need to be on it anymore and they're able to maintain?
So, and the way we're using it, it's both a short and long-term solution because it's really lifting the hood up of the root cause of metabolic dysfunction. So when we think about, not to get into the weeds, but glucose disposal issues, insulin resistance, the beiging of white fat, looking at the mitochondrial's role in weight loss resistance, this is all happening, right? Then we got the leptin, the ghrelin, adiponectin levels. How do we activate things like AMPK? Metabolic dysfunction is rampant. It's one of my favorite formulas because we even think on the whole blood sugar, fatigue. There's so much connected to it. Type 3 diabetes, Alzheimer's is type 3 diabetes, right? So much connected to it that this is a really intriguing peptide that anyone listening has access to.
This is wonderful. Best for insomnia.
So kind of just level set it. The peptide that most people talk about is the DISP, which is injectable, but it's hit or miss. There's really not a true peptide. Some people say BPC-157 has a domino effect, will improve sleep. I don't really know of an oral peptide that is out. There is one that we are evaluating right now. It's under clinical study in Australia through our peptide research partner, Noritas, based in Ireland. This is called Peptisleep. So we are evaluating something that would be potentially 2025.
Okay.
If somebody's looking for something now, a couple of ingredients, although some people do refer to this as a peptide, it's not, is dihydrohinochiol, DHHB. That's been one. We use it in a stack called Serenity.
That's the Magnolia, correct?
Yep. So Magnolia bark, hinochiol, dihydrohinochiol is 20 times stronger. It's very powerful, very hard to get. We have it at 15 milligrams with things like saffron, L-theanine, holy basil, and then a gut-brain axis GABA stimulating probiotic. And so that's Serenity, and that's going to quiet the mind. I call it nature's chill pill. But once the Peptisleep comes out, we're also looking at some other, natural compounds to stack to help people because sleep's a major issue. So
it really is.
We got to get this right.
It really is. So how long do people need to be taking these to get results? I mean, you mentioned that one that takes about 8 weeks in terms of the weight loss. What is there? Does it differ? Again, I'm assuming peptide by peptide. I would imagine dosing has an effect. I would imagine method of delivery has an effect.
Yes. And I always like to set people up for success with realistic timelines. So this isn't a new multivitamin in the patient care. This is usually a 30 to 90 day plan. Now, some things like the BPC, PEA, KPV, that can work week 1 for some. Others, you might need 30 to 90 days. So, I kind of use that as the leverage. Ignite, when we think about metabolic dysfunction, any legit clinical study with lifestyle medicine tied into it is going to be a 12-week study.
Okay, that's good to know. Now, in terms of dosing, I know some products and some supplement companies are very sort of notorious for really underdosing on their bottles. And so you necessarily are, looking at the dosing recommendation on the bottle and titrating up significantly. Others, it is very much like what you see on the bottle, you do not go over. So where do you guys stand in that?
Yeah, for the majority, it's going to be the serving size is per day for the month. And really that's outside of things like the BPC, and you can up the dose short term, right, especially in an acute situation or an injury. But I think 1 to 2 a day is going to be where most people will go with that.
Good. Long-term use, are there risks of this? And you said, if we're thinking about, efficacy, we're really kind of trying to expand our horizon to that sort of 90, 120 days. Do we want to make sure that we wean off at a certain point? Is there any risk of interrupting endogenous production of these compounds because we're taking them exogenously?
Another great question. So I think, again, that 30 to 90 days is going to be the sweet spot. We have other people that take this long term. It's very hard to tell someone after they've reached their health goals and this has been the difference maker in the protocol that you don't need this anymore, right? Some people are like, nah, I'm going to keep taking it.
Yeah.
But when you look at everything else we have within the portfolio, within the toolbox, what I'd say is reassess, see if the goals have shifted. Then you may want to reinvest that money into other things to the next phase of care.
Okay, I'm going to dive into questions. Lots of questions. So I'm going to go here. I don't know that I'm going to be able to get through them all. So Min's actually asked a question that I was going to save till the end, but I want to ask it now, which is, is there a good resource, a training, a guidebook that people can use to learn about peptides? And I want to just put the asterisk with, I've seen a lot of the trainings, a lot of the resources are assuming licensed practitioner. Are you aware of any training resources for the non-licensed practitioner?
That is, are we looking to get certified or just learn more?
Learn.
Okay. So, we have all our webinars that you can stream. If you want, we can give that link out. If you feel like it's good. So that's vimeo.com/better health. I think that's, there's a lot there. You can go by topic, go by speaker.
That's Better Help or Better Health?
Better Health.
Better Health. Got it.
Yep. So vimeo.com. Let's see, other go-to. There's Natalie Nidham. I don't know if you know Natalie. She has a great group, a great peptide group. It's a private Facebook group. She does podcasts. There's a membership too if you want like the behind the scenes and ask questions. That's a great group too. I've heard some talks about IFM getting more involved with peptides. We'll see if that happens at the AIC this year. There's some books out there, but again, when you start getting into the weeds, you're going to start learning about peptides, unfortunately, that you don't have access to.
Exactly.
At this point, or research only. So it's kind of like a tease. It's like reading the Life Extension magazine. You just want everything in it.
I know, 100%. And you all, I know we've only talked about a handful of your products. I definitely want to have you come back, and we'll do a deep dive into some more of the products. And we will share with you how to open up an account, and you can do some perusing. But holy camole, you guys, you're going to want to be on everything. Juliet has an interesting question here. If BPC-157 doesn't improve a soft tissue injury, does that tell you about the nature of the injury, or why wouldn't it work?
Well, listen, I don't think it's a one size fit all for everybody, right? We would have solved healthcare at this point. We wouldn't be sick if it was helping everyone. But I think soft tissue injuries can be very complex, and so we feel confident that it's going to help. It may not be the end-all be-all, but I would be shocked if it's not having some sort of positive impact on the greater cause of the issue.
Yeah, that feels like my experience. It's not the only thing. I'm still doing PT and all the other things around it, but it definitely feels like it's moving the needle. Amanda asks, if it helps modulate immune function, can oral BPC help with autoimmune conditions?
Yes. I have to be careful with some of the claims I make.
100%.
I'm tied back to the company, but I guess I should say many of our healthcare practitioners are utilizing this in a clinical setting to support autoimmune issues with their patients.
Great. What considerations would there be for BPC and hormone balance? If it changes growth hormone levels, I'd expect impacts on sex hormones as well. Have you seen any negative impacts on hormones, fertilities, and cycles? Interesting question.
Yeah, interesting question. I haven't tracked this close enough. I would say it's very common for doctors that are doing bioidentical hormones to be doing this. And when I say it impacts, if you're doing injectable peptides like semorelin, ipamorelin, CJC, testosterone, it's very common to stack BPC with that to make BPC, make the growth hormone receptors more active to those injectable peptides. So, but yeah, very common to use with testosterone and things like that. And that's why you're seeing a lot of bodybuilders and sports
Right.
athletes turn. But we have not seen, I would say, a lot of drawbacks. I mean, a very safe profile here.
Right. I just want to go back to something you commented on earlier, the fact that, a lot of these substances have been banned by WADA. And to me, that's like the best case, the best argument for efficacy, right? Because if they're being used to enhance performance so significantly in that population, then that tells you that they're, elite athletes don't do things that don't work, is my experience.
That's right.
Juliet asks, how do peptides fit into the root cause approach to healing? Are they meant to facilitate and accelerate addressing root causes like mold, toxicity, Lyme, etc.? Or do you use peptides to address the root itself?
Wow. Can I say yes to both? Is that an answer? I don't know. I mean,
Sure.
I think, again, we're talking about millions of different peptides, right? It's all these different peptides. They all have different purposes. I think most peptides are influencing both, right? You got the roots and the limbs of the tree. So I think that's what makes these so unique and so favorable to so many protocols.
Yeah. Jennifer asks, I work with those with diverticulitis specifically. At what point would you consider BPC 157? Acute phases or something more long-term for maintenance?
Yeah, I would say it's not either or. I think, we know this is going to be very healing and supportive. So whether it's day one with that client or year two, turn to this even for a month, right? Or 90 days, right? I always, one of the great peptide lecturers that we have always says, it's hard to determine where to start. Just start with something, right? We know so much good's going to happen. Pick your favorite, integrate it, and then reassess and see, well, where do you want to go from here?
I love it. Could we use this as a time actually to talk about that difference? You have somebody in an acute situation like I was when I saw you. I know I was at a higher dose when I first started using this product, but then tapering it back to just 1 to 2 a day. Although I have to admit, psychologically, I was like, well, if I just keep it this really high dose, maybe this will go that much faster. But is that one of the strategies that you see practitioners using, is a slightly higher dose at acute phase, and then once we've moved out of that acute phase, bringing it down to more of a moderate maintenance dose?
Yeah, and I think for most cases, you're not going to really need more than 2, but we've had practitioners up that as you personally experienced.
Yeah. And we'll also say, I mean, these products, these are not your like $15 on the shelf, like these are definitely, they're an investment. And so, I think there's that piece to consider. I mean, you get what you pay for very, very strongly with these. They're so high quality, but that's probably a limiting factor for some folks as well. Can you speak to BPC and any contraindications with an IBD diagnosis? Mesalamine, Stelara, Humira, and Remicade, so some of the other meds that are used. Would you be cautious if somebody's already on those? Can they coexist?
Yeah, we always have to be careful when we talk about, drugs, right, and medications. I always, got to connect with the doctor that wrote those prescriptions. But I'll say on a provider level, a lot of our providers are using BPC 157 with people that have IBS and IBD with great success. Again, we're only relying on animal models, but I mean, BPC has cured an ulcer in an animal model, right? They've ruptured an Achilles of a rat and only put BPC there, and it rebuilt the Achilles. I mean, these are, when you read about it, it's like, feels too good to be true. Right. But again, always want to be cautious when there's some of those more aggressive drugs being used, especially when you're not the prescribing doctor. But a lot of our providers that do our prescribing rights are creating protocols that feature both of these together.
Great question here from Juliet. How do you recommend vetting manufacturers of peptides? What are the red flags and pitfalls to be aware of? Not for human consumption would maybe be one.
Yeah. I mean, if you're listening, you got prescribing rights, you want to be on a 503A level, right? I mean, they're accredited, they're getting audited, they're doing the right work. We already, I think, spoke pretty clearly on this other group, which is research only, not for human consumption. And then this other area, if they are a supplement status, right, they're CGMP, that they're, that you like what they stand for, right? Because I think there's a lot of fly-by-nights. You Google BPC 157 right now, you're going to see a dozen oral options, right? All different prices. So it really comes down to like, what does the brand stand for? Is this the only product they're selling? That's usually a little fishy. Like, oh, all of a sudden they're in the BPC business, but they could shut the lights off overnight because this is a quick run for them. So I think it goes by your overall impression of their portfolio, their commitment to quality, commitment to education. Do they pick up the phone? Simple things, right? Do they answer your emails? As far as the vetting, you want to make sure that they're a dependable partner for you.
Yeah, 100%. Ellen has a follow-up question on the contraindication with cancer. She's asking about BPC, but maybe we talk about peptides generally speaking. Where she says, why would BPC, which is for the gut, be contraindicated with cancer in the 5 years post-diagnosis? Are you being abundantly cautious? Because there was a comment earlier on of somebody who had peptides. I'm not sure if it was BPC. I can scroll up and take a look at the comment, injected into cancer as a strategy. Now, that's a medical doctor using it. It's a little bit different than what we're talking about here, but can you expand a little bit more on that?
Yeah, well, BPC, one of the mechanisms of action is that it can promote angiogenesis. And so for some, that's a problem. And again, it also goes into scope. I have attended lectures in the last year of doctors using this for cancer. As a company, and as our stance is that we have to at least share these concerns. What you do with it is ultimately up to you. I'm just sharing best practices and what we're telling people.
We've talked a bit about dosing. I just want this is a more clarification. Do we base dosing recommendations on body weight, or is it really quite standard?
Yeah, I mean, if we're picking on BPC again, usually 1 to 2 caps daily is going to be what most people are doing. If some people are starting at 2, the goal is to get them to 1 to maintain it, make it more affordable. That's why a lot of our peptides do come in, BPC related, come with a 30 or a 60 serving to hit on different price points or different points of care.
Right. Okay. Jennifer has a question about the Serenity product that you mentioned. On a recent call, it was mentioned that Serenity can cause DHEA to decrease. We were doing more of a clinical deep dive in one of our clinical mastery calls. Do you think that DHEA should be tested prior to and while taking Serenity? And this is because of the Magnolia, I'm looking at the wrong bottle, the DHHB, correct? I've been wanting to incorporate it, but they already are suboptimal in DHEA, so I have been hesitant. Can you speak to that?
So DHEA? Yeah, I mean, at the end of the day, I haven't heard this before.
Oh, actually.
I don't have practitioners testing for it. So I wasn't on the call that this was brought up. I would say by promoting a deep restful sleep and extending deep sleep, that would have a positive impact on hormone optimization and a lot of other repair mechanisms. So
right.
I don't think a lot of downside. Maybe the studies that were using hinokiol or magnolia bark at much higher levels. You're looking at 7.5 milligrams to 15 milligrams, depending if you're using 1 or 2 capsules. So potentially that could be, why you're not seeing that potential issue.
Right. Interesting. Suzanne asks, can the DNF10 be utilized safely with clients who are also injecting with the GLP-1 to help them wean off the GLP-1 and still have success losing and or maintaining weight? Really great question.
Yeah, that's how a lot of people are using it. They're either using it as a first line of therapy or as a phase 2 or in combination, right? Those are some of the big buckets. I know we haven't even talked about muscle health, muscle loss as it relates to GLP-1s or aging or immune dysfunction. We do have peptides for that. And so, yeah, I think that is a common strategy to consider.
Excellent. I want to ask you to share how there's lots of questions peppered through here. How do we get these? So let's answer that. We're definitely going to include, I've already popped it in the chat for those who are listening live, but we will definitely in our show notes as well include the link to the training resources, which I highly recommend you guys spend some time with. It is just so rich, really phenomenal resource there. That's very generous of you to share that. How do folks get, and we have restorative wellness practitioners are granted practitioner accounts. So how do they access that?
So our website is www.healthgevity Healthgev, and that's healthgev.com. And on that homepage, there's a green banner on the top that rotates, but you're going to want to click here to open up an HCP wholesale account. That's going to be what you want. Although if you are a non-dispensing practitioner and more virtual, there's another option that's on the bottom of the page that you're going to see HCP affiliate account. And that will get you a custom link. We can set up a custom code, and we'll do all the heavy lifting and distributing on your behalf, and you'll get a commission that way. So, and happy to talk offline and identify what would be best for where your practice is today.
Wonderful. Also, for those of you who want to try before you buy or try before you commit to a full practitioner account, we do, Michael has generously given us a code RWS to get 10% off your first order. I'm going to give a shout out to a few of my favorite products because, as I said, you guys, once you go through the list, you're going to want it all. We've talked extensively about the BPC. I think that's a fantastic, this triple one with the KPV and the PEA. The Serenity, sleep is my nemesis, and I've tried lots of different things for sleep. This has popped to the top of my list. I love it. It's also, if you are like me and have a very busy, active, rather stressed out mind, this really helps. And then I'm also loving the opposite of that in the morning, since I have gotten off caffeine, is this Brain Boost. For those of you who heard our conversation with Sean Wells, one of my favorite ingredients that he has come up with is this paraxanthine, or the name of it is Infinity. And if you listen to that interview, at the time it was only available in energy drinks, which I just don't like. And so I'm delighted that now you can get it with a whole bunch of other amazing stuff in this Brain Boost product. And then what is the name of the one that is good for muscle recovery? Is it it's got the Peptistrong in it. I can't remember the name of it.
So now we have two formulas out. So what you're talking about is called Longevity. That has the Peptistrong, the Pepti Pump, Synactive, and Estrogen. We also just came out with a powder, unflavored, unsweetened, that has the Peptistrong with creatine, leucine, glutamine, and taurine.
That is actually the one. I just saw Dr. Turnpaw in person a couple of weeks ago, and he showed me some, and we were oohing and awing over it. I'm really excited to get my hands on some of that. So there's some fun starting points, or at least through my filter. Thank you so much. You can also follow Michael and Healthgevity at Instagram. It's Healthgev, so that same Healthgev. This has been fantastic. I have so many more questions for you, and I'm sure our community has so many more questions for you. So I would love to talk about something, whether we do a training for our folks, or if we just have you back on the podcast, or I know lots of opportunities here, but thank you so much for spending your time with us this afternoon. It's just been fantastic and so eye-opening.
The pleasure is all mine. Thank you. Excited for the future and to work with your whole group and community. Please don't be a stranger. Reach out, email, call us. Let us know we could be best supporting your practice's journey and helping your community. So appreciate everything you're doing.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you all for such fantastic questions. We will see you very soon.